In this lesson, we're going to look at how to work with arrays and functions. And I'm primarily going to work with passing arrays to functions to perform some sort of computations on them. So the first thing we want to do is create a function that returns the average of a set of grades. So we're going to call this array average. And when we do that, we have to tell the compiler that we're going to pass an array of a certain type, and we also have to tell it the size. So notice that I have to have at least two arguments or two parameters, an array and a variable or a parameter to track the size, which I'm calling SZ here. So notice that I just use array with the open, closed, empty brackets, and that's what you do. You don't have to specify the size. That's going to come from this variable. But you have to tell the compiler that a parameter is going to be an array, and that's what the empty brackets do. After this, it's pretty much the standard sequence that we follow. Whoops. So notice how we use size to control our loop. Then we just perform the summing command that the summing task that we always perform. Compute the average and then return it as the return value of the function. And we're done. So right here we can say just like that. So let's run this program. And we see the average is 82, which is what we got in the last lesson. So that's correct. Another thing we can do is curve the grades. That's a void function. We're going to call this function curve. Same parameters. Let's put a little space here. I'm sorry. Do that again. So to curve the grades, we're going to simply loop through the array again, and then for each element add 5 points to it. And notice we don't have to return that as a return value. And the reason we don't have to do that is because arrays are reference objects by default. So we don't have to either set this as a reference object or return it as a return value. So here we can call the function So we're going to call the function curve grades with the grade size. That's our other argument. And then we'll write a loop to display them. And remember that here are the original values, which we could display. In fact, let's just do that. Let's add that in right here. Control C, Control V. Then we'll put a couple of lines here, like that. So notice we haven't had to do anything other than simply add 5 points to each. We're assuming that's how we're going to curve. We could have made a third parameter for the amount, but we'll just stick with that for now. So let's run the program. Oops, looks like we have, oh, there it is. Okay, so The original grades were 78, 89, 84, 71, 90. Now we have 83, 94, 89, 76, and 95. So there were two examples of passing arrays as parameters to functions. And in the first one, we used it simply as a way to send in some grades to be able to average. And in the second example, we actually used the array to make a change to it by curving it. And the most important thing to understand is that arrays are reference objects by default. So we didn't have to pass the array as a reference object in order to change it, because arrays are passed by reference all the time and not passed by value. And with that, we've wrapped up this lesson on arrays as function parameters.